This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
I'm Sam Abu Al-Samad.
I'm Rebecca Lindland.
All right, welcome again for another week. It's still winter.
Kind of on the verge of it here.
Yeah.
Got up to 42 yesterday.
There you go. I think we're headed for 50 today, which is going to be great because we had snow and ice a couple days ago. And I get to go to the mountain today. So we'll see how the media car does in the ice.
I made it rain in Palm Springs, California yesterday.
Oh, excellent!
It never rains in California.
I know. There's a good song about that, isn't there?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Although last time I was there, it rained too. And did everybody lose their mind?
Yes. Well, fortunately, I actually escaped early enough. But BMW had a big event there, and it looks like they were able to modify it for a lot of fun. So I give them a ton of credit because we were on the track and doing autocross and all sorts of fun things that are not fun in the rain. So I do feel badly for them, but it was good to see rain in Southern California.
Go ahead, Sam.
Are you able to talk about those yet, or do we have to save those for a later date?
So for the most part, I'm able to talk about most of what I drove. We got to drive in the brand new BMW X7, their 7-seater large crossover, but we are not allowed to give driving impressions. So I asked if I could give riding impressions, and I didn't get an answer.
Okay. Well, we'll save that one for another day.
Yes, exactly. But I did get a chance to drive and ride in the Rolls-Royce Cullinan large SUV.
That's the one I'm curious about.
That was delish.
It was a very satisfied, yeah. And I've seen it pop up on Twitter. Some of our other auto journalist friends are there, and so they're showing these things in the water, basically, or just in the wet, where you not normally see a Rolls-Royce, especially for a drive event. So that's got to be a little different.
So that's what that was the modification that they made. We didn't get a chance to take it in the wet. We did take I think we took the X5 in the wet, and that was fun. I got that. It pretty much was up to its tires, and that was really cool to see, such a large SUV. I used to have an X5, really do a great job through the wet. So that was fun. But the Cullinan was, it was a treat. I don't know if I would want to drive it every day, but I'm more than happy to be driven in it every day in the back seat, mostly so I can curl my toes into the $1,500 lamb's wool floor mat.
Oh,
so that was a treat. Yeah.
I remember I drove a Phantom like that, and I think it was actually slightly rainy that day for that event, and the PR guy for Rolls, we were all kind of gingerly trying not to get it dirty. He was like, "They're wool. Sheep get wet. You can clean them off."
Well, that's not to digress too much. I will say that is one of the amazing things about some of these all natural fibers is that you can clean them off. You can clean wool, animal skin, leather. As long as it's not a ballpoint pen, you're doing pretty good, actually. So, but it was a treat. I have to say, the Rolls was a very good steward of the brand. Very, very comfortable. It was a ton of fun. I mean, that thing went from 0 to 60. I got triple digits, and I didn't even mean to. And I know I probably say that in every show.
Resident Leadfoot.
Yeah. But, it's powered by a 6.75 liter engine, and it needs it because it weighs almost 6,000 pounds. But it was it moved. It absolutely moved. It has a V12 twin turbo engine, 571 horsepower. It was just, as I said, it was definitely a worthy vehicle of the Rolls-Royce brand.
So let me ask you this. Would you rather be driven around in a Phantom or a Cullinan?
Well, I'd rather drive the Phantom.
Really? Because the one time I've driven the Phantom, many years ago, it struck me as a car that was better suited to be driven in than to drive. Because it had like no steering feel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. To be fair, I mean, the Ghost is my favorite.
Yeah.
So the Ghost was like a super sporty version of the Phantom. I think the Cullinan, it's a big vehicle. It doesn't drive overly large. But I'm not going to argue either way. If I'm in the Rolls, I'm good.
Okay.
That's right. A
Fair
private
enough.
yacht is still a private yacht.
Exactly.
All right. Well, so let's continue talking about what we're driving. And so you came back, and you've gone a couple of rungs back down the vehicle status ladder, but still in a good way. So you're in the 2019 Kia Forte, which is that's a good car, even for the much less money than a Rolls.
Yes, much less money, but yes, I you know what? I've got this. It's the EX version of EX trim line. It's got a 2.0 liter multi-port injection 4-cylinder engine. I love how they call it the intelligent variable transmission as opposed to continuous variable. It's a variable.
Nobody wants a CVT.
Exactly.
But that CVT doesn't act quite as much like a CVT. It's very well behaved.
It is very, very well behaved, and this thing is absolutely packed. So the retail price is $21,990, which is a fantastic price to start with for all the stuff that you get. I mean, that's with, automatic climate control. You've got the rear camera, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, power driver's seat. You've got all the safety features. So it's got forward collision avoidance, forward collision warning, lane departure warning, lane keep. I mean, it's really stocked with, this would be hill start assist. This would be an incredibly well-equipped vehicle in any case. And then for only $3,200, then you've got the EX Launch Edition. And that's where you've got the 8-inch touchscreen navigation system. You've got a power sunroof, the forward collision avoidance assist pedal, which I don't even know what that is yet.
Yeah, careful with that.
Yeah, I've got to see what that's about.
If it detects you're closing on something, it primes the braking system to deliver a full power stop.
Oh, awesome.
When you just tap the pedal. So
what's interesting though, it must be speed controlled, because in my driveway, I have a stone wall at the top of my driveway, and I have like sticks sticking out so I can see it. But I was kind of surprised because other vehicles, as I pull up to it, obviously I'm going fairly slow, it doesn't do anything.
Huh.
But this one did. But so the surprise and delight, and this is also actually a standard feature, is heated and ventilated front seats. And that I was blown away by that last night. I think I told you guys that I sent you something in Slack, because I get in this car and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And that's for $21,990. So, when we were talking about the Mazda 3, now the Forte EX is a sedan, so that, it does limit the cargo in it. But this thing was a lot of fun to drive. I landed at LaGuardia at 5:30. I was in rush hour traffic. I got into the car at like 6:15. So I am in the thick of New York rush hour traffic. And this thing was, I was able to zip in and out of traffic, get into the lanes I wanted to. It did at one point. I had a little bit of a runway, and it wasn't thrilled to be, pedal to the metal kind of thing. But
that is my one complaint about this new Forte, is that engine is a little bit underpowered.
Yes, it is. It is for sure. But I also got the fuel economy is estimated at 34, and I got just over. I got 34.8.
Well, you had the throttle wide open all the time, so there's no pumping losses. So it's
exactly.
More efficient. But I'm impressed with it. So even as the EX trim, it's pretty well loaded. But if you're a bargain hunter, it starts at like $18,000. The Forte is a really good value.
And especially so all in this car with handling, with freight and handling, is $26,450. And I have to say, I mean, again, is it luxurious? Not really, but it's stocked with all sorts of good features. And when we think back to the CX-5 that we talked about last time, for $40,000, now granted it's a small crossover, but wow. I mean, this
But it's
doesn't have
not. But it's not
all-wheel
like the
drive,
CX-5 has a whole lot more room. I mean, it does. Granted, it does have better performance, and it's got that crossover body style.
right? And it has all-wheel drive.
Yeah, but aside from that, I mean, I would give it maybe $3,000 or $4,000 premium for that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of it, you're getting almost the same stuff, in this Forte, for the equivalent, let's say 10 grand less.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm thrilled with this thing. It's great.
So that makes me think of sort of two different questions, right? For the first is there's stuff versus quality. It's not terribly difficult as an automaker, I think, to add a lot of these features. They come from your suppliers, and you just figure out how they fit in your models and what you're going to price them at, and away you go. I think some of the difference you might find between the Forte EX, even if it has leather seats or something, and that signature. What is the CX-5 signature? Is maybe
right.
the quality of the things you touch,
sure.
the quality of the leather, but that's a but what $10,000-$15,000 Golf? That's
when you compare the Forte to its competitors in this segment, it has a surprisingly premium feel to it too.
Yeah.
Yes, I will acknowledge that the Mazda does feel a bit more premium than this.
But better.
but is it $10,000 better? I don't know.
Yeah, but and also it makes me wonder. The sort of the second question I have about it is, what's Kia making on these? Are they running these cars unprofitably here in the U.S. because they can get profit out of them in other markets, and they're making profit on other things here? So it's just sort of like, whatever.
Well, the content, I mean, they've got, the major sources, 53% of the vehicle comes from Mexico, 44% comes from Korea. It's built in, the final assembly is in Mexico. So they've done a good job of, sourcing and trying to keep the sourcing relatively local, 53% in Mexico. So I think they're trying to keep the pricing, the build price down as much as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean that makes sense when you're selling it for very thin. Their margin has to be razor thin.
Oh, if at all, for sure. Yeah. But I think it's and also I don't know what the residual value on something like this would be. Also, the Mazda probably has a better residual value because of those things, because of all-wheel drive, because of it being a crossover. But again, is it $14,000 different? I don't know. I think if you're looking for value in your vehicle, I think it's hard to beat something like the Kia Forte EX.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider about residual values as well is it's really important if you're someone who gets new cars every couple of years, or right. If you're leasing all the time, then it makes a big difference, in your leasing payment, your lease payment costs. On the other hand, if you're somebody like me that buys the car and keeps it for 8, 9, 10 years, the residual values, by the time you get out to that 8, 9, 10 year period, the difference in residual values among these different brands, starts to shrink a lot, and it's not that big a deal anymore.
Right. It is. Absolutely. It is. But I just, Mazda, I mean, sometimes it is a little hard to compare the two, but I do think that this price gap of $13,900 is enormous.
Well, good for Mazda. That's ambition.
Get it. Absolutely.
And before we leave it to you, mentioned that it's sedan only, but there is the Forte 5. This one I have. This one I have is a sedan. Okay.
The Forte 5 that they're selling right now is still the previous generation model.
So they have to refresh it on this new platform or this new model.
And presumably they will. I think we'll probably see that perhaps by the end of this year, or early next year. I think we'll see a new generation Forte 5.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Since we talked about Mazda quite a bit, let's pivot. Sam, you're in the CX-9 Turbo. Speaking of things with kind of weak engines.
So this is the big Mazda, and yeah, this is the 3-row crossover. And it has the same 2.5 liter turbo that's in that CX-5 that Rebecca and I both drove. And in the smaller CX-5, that engine works well. Here, it's more like adequate. It's not. Let's put it this way: you're not going to be, facing off against, the Ford Edge ST or the new Explorer ST, in this thing. It's not meant for that. It's meant for more. This is your basic premium family hauler. Excuse me. So this, but even at that, it's not quite as the third row is not as big as what you're going to find in some of the other bigger 3-row crossovers. This is going to be more competitive with something like the Kia Sorento, or the GMC Acadia. So it's on the smaller end of 3-row crossovers. So you want, basically you're talking younger kids in that third row, not necessarily adults. Adults are not going to be happy in that third row for longer periods of time. If you need to carry more people for larger people for longer periods of time, you're definitely going to want something bigger. Beyond that, though, I mean, the rest of this vehicle is really nice. Well, actually, there's also the climate control thing, which, Dan, you've complained about in the past. The air conditioning you felt was kind of weak, given the time of year. I didn't really have an opportunity to evaluate the air conditioning.
You don't say. The air conditioning is great in
you
Michigan.
Disappoint us.
January.
Yeah, the air conditioning is great in Michigan in February. I don't know what you're complaining about.
Just roll down the window. You don't even use it.
So I'll let that go for another time. But the rest of the vehicle, it has that same kind of premium feel that we've become used to in all current generation Mazdas. Really nice materials, really well executed, and the one that I was driving was like 42.5, which in comparison to the CX-5, I would, or sorry, no, total came to $45,060, all in, including delivery charge. So, but still, at that price point for this larger vehicle, and given that you're getting more stuff for that, it's a little closer to being reasonable in price. And I think it's more competitive, price wise with the rest of the segment than the CX-5, which I think, is absolutely on the high end of what you should be paying for a compact crossover. For an upper mid-size crossover like this one, I think the $45,000 price point is not totally out of line.
Did you have the Grand Touring or the Signature, or which trim?
This one was the Grand Touring all-wheel drive in Snowflake White Pearl.
Oh, that's pretty.
With the sand interior.
That's the way I would pick it.
Yeah, no, it was really nice. Unfortunately, I got it the day before heading out to Chicago for the auto show last week, and we got hit by an overnight bout of freezing rain. And so the first morning I got up to drive it to the train station, it was all encased in a 1/4 inch of ice that I had to scrape off the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can say that while you may complain that the air conditioning was somewhat on the weak side, the heating system, it heated up very quickly, and the rear window defogger did break up the ice on the back window very quickly.
Well, see, there you go. That was actually one of the things I was going to ask about, was seeing if it's just like a undersized system overall, or if it's just the air conditioner. I think it's just the AC side of it may be a little under capacity for the size of the vehicle. The rest of it is, it was great. And like I said, the engine, compared to what's available as an option in a lot of the competition, the engine's not particularly strong. But I didn't find it particularly weak-kneed either. I thought, the 250 horsepower is adequate for the size of vehicle. Yeah, I think what we see with Mazda is we tend to really like them. I'm not sure that the market likes them as much. And when you sort of shoot these cars out, shoot the CX-9 out against its competition, it's lovely to drive and it's pretty. And the materials are nice inside. The design is very nice. But those practical things like, is it as roomy? Is it, on par, as good a value as, which we talked about, the Acadia, I think is a competitor for it, or the Sorento. I mean, the Sorento is a very good value. So Mazda,
I would say certainly compared to the Acadia, it's absolutely a very good value and probably a better value. GMC, is in that same, trying to go, more premium, their vehicles are more premium priced. And I would say that this is absolutely a better value than the Acadia. And, absolutely, at the price point has a much nicer cabin. It's a much more pleasant place to be. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else is in this kind of, the Sorrento is another one, the previous generation, Santa Fe, the 3-row Santa Fe, I think this is a better choice than the Santa Fe. I think it was better executed than the old Santa Fe. This would probably be comparable to like the new Palisade or the Telluride.
Okay.
Although those might be a little bigger. So, I think it's definitely worth a look, if you're in the, kind of the 5+2, looking for a 5+2 as opposed to a full 7-seater.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Or you can keep all your money and get a Dodge Journey. Because you can still get a Journey.
and it's shocking how many Journeys Fiat Chrysler still manages to sell, at bargain basement prices. And actually, it's shocking how much better the Journey feels now than it did 10 years ago when it first launched.
I mean, when we were shopping for the Grand Cherokee, we first tried a Durango. The Durango felt too big for my wife. It's too long. The back windows, the visibility isn't as good. So they suggested we try a Journey. Okay. I was shocked at how much she liked it, because it's very easy to drive. It's very car-like. It does have that extra row. It has all the features. It was an updated version, so it has the interior that it currently has, which is pretty nice. And I was just like, we're not buying this. Like, I was like, it's fine now, but this is essentially a stretched out Compass, and no, we're not buying. I was like, we could have gotten out the door in the 20s with it. And I think that's the thing is I still like it because it's, if you want to talk about value, like it's, nobody pays sticker for that.
It's yeah. I mean, it's not a terrible vehicle anymore.
It has all the features you want.
And for what it's worth, I'm just looking at the Sorrento pricing. The Sorrento SX Limited goes for $46,490. So it's actually a little bit more than this. So, probably if you went for, one that was pretty much comparably equipped, it would be in the same price range for a Sorrento as this one. So I think the value proposition is actually not as bad here as what we saw with the CX-5.
Yeah, I think the CX-5 really gets stuck in some ways.
And one advantage this one does have is, like other Mazdas, it does have a central rotary control knob on the console for the infotainment system. So there's the display is also a touchscreen, but I prefer to use it with the control knob, which I find is a better way to interface with these systems than a touchscreen while you're driving. And it does have Android Auto and CarPlay support now.
Yeah, it's hard to not recommend the CX-9 for people who like driving. But where I'm cautious about it is just like, you got to try one in the summer, because there's nothing worse than like a full car in the heat in August, and it just won't get comfortable. Like that to me is a problem. But if that's my only complaint, that's something they can fix. So
yeah. All right. What about you, Dan?
I drew the luxury card this week. I have a Lincoln Nautilus Black Label, which I was a little skeptical about at first, because this is basically an Edge. They've done a pretty good job at differentiating it for the most part. It has, a distinctive look about it, especially sort of the front, front half of it, looks very Lincoln. From the back, it's okay. It's an Edge. It was the MK. What was it? MKX before?
Yeah.
Same thing. And there's only so much you can do on that, existing architecture. And so I also didn't expect that it was going to feel, tight and new. I thought it was going to be like my sort of usual impressions of this vehicle, no matter what badge it wears. Like, yeah, okay, it's got the 2.7 liter twin turbo and all-wheel drive, so it's powerful. It also has big wheels. I've never met one of these that didn't feel kind of clumsy. No matter how well it could actually handle it, it feels like there's a lot of mass moving around, because there is. It's got big wheels. It's heavy to begin with. I was actually really, really surprised. Whatever kind of updating has gone on with the Nautilus, or maybe I myself have softened. I don't know. But this is
you've been beaten into submission.
Yeah. This is an outstanding highway car, and I can't really see. First of all, I've got this is either a pre-production or something. It doesn't have a price on the Monroney, so I think it's about $62,000, and it comes really well equipped for that kind of money. I think that's
it should, because it starts at 40.
Yeah, so it has, it starts to add up when you get the all-wheel drive and the turbo V6 and so the assistance packages and stuff. The Black Label really includes pretty much everything. There's not too many options to select because they're already all there.
Because the Black Label starts at $56,895. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. And it's really nicely done. The interior, in particular, is beautiful, and it feels luxurious. And that was my problem with earlier versions of the MKC I'd driven. Is they drive with that little bit of grittiness that the Edge has in it, or it had. I haven't driven an Edge in a while now. Where it just, you feel like it does everything fine, but it's not as smoothly damped or just carefully attended to as you'd expect in a luxury vehicle. And this Nautilus doesn't have that anymore. It feels really nicely done. I have actually had it in comfort mode, which is kind of odd for me. But it does it really, it goes down the road, especially the highway, very comfortably, not sloppy. And there's plenty of power from the Nano V6, so it'll hustle, no problem. Handles decently. It does still have a little bit of awkwardness over certain surfaces, but I think it makes up for it by being very smooth, very comfortable. It's got the 22-way multi-contour seats, which are
only
nice.
22 ways?
I know, only 22 ways. And
they couldn't put the 30-way seats from the Navigator in there?
I didn't like the Navigator seats, actually. These are it's just, and it's bigger than some of the other competitors, or at least it's big enough to be quite useful. It's got a roomy cargo area, roomy back seat. The center console in between the seats has areas carved out of it for storage. And I was trying to compare it. Anytime I get in one of this class of vehicles, whether it's a Cadillac or a Lincoln or, Infiniti or whatever, I always compare it to the Lexus RX because I feel like that's still the benchmark for the class. And in the past, I'd had a hard time sort of stacking up the domestic competition against that Lexus. And that's not my favorite car either. The Lexus feels like I have my complaints about it, I will say. But this feels really, really I'm not sure if opulent is the right word, but it feels like it offers you more, and it's more distinctive than you might find in the Lexus because it has that Lincoln personality. It's got Alcantara all up the pillars and everything. So everything you touch is really, really nice. And that hasn't always been the case. And I think if you were to jump into a Cadillac, you'd find stuff to touch that's not nice.
That to me is the biggest difference. I mean, I agree. I drove the Nautilus a few months ago at the launch, and it wasn't the Black Label version of it, but the interior was just gorgeous. I agree. It's darn near close to opulent. and it was just beautiful. And that to me is the biggest competitive advantage that they have over Cadillac, because I was really disappointed. I continue to be really disappointed in Cadillac's interior. And I don't know, it breaks my heart a little bit, because Cadillac is Cadillac. Like, right. I think I've gone on this rant before, but it just, I'm very conscious of good stewardship, who is being a good steward of their brand. And the interiors that Cadillac is putting out, it's just not a good representation. Whereas I think Lincoln, oh my gosh, I mean, their interiors are just gorgeous.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, they are a very pleasant place to spend time when you're driving.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a very pleasant car to drive. I think, I'm not damning it with faint praise by saying it's an outstanding highway car. I mean, that's been the majority of my commute anyway, and it's just excellent. It has all of the ADAS systems work pretty well. It does it with the lane keeping, sort of lets you wobble a little more than I'm comfortable with over towards the lines, but you're supposed to pay attention. So I was testing.
Yeah.
And the flip side is, if it's more aggressive, then it becomes a little bit intrusive. So there is that balance. But yeah, I mean, this is just, I could get in this thing and just drive all the way to Wisconsin without a problem, and it would just be fine. And so that's impressive. I think that their edge is the interior, and they're working with what they've got, right? They've got certain platforms. They may not have sort of the driver's car cachet that any of the Cadillac sedans have, but they've got platforms that they understand. This is not new stuff here. But
they're also not. They've made it clear that they're not trying to address that same market that Cadillac was. Cadillac basically tried to go after the premium German brands, the BMW, Mercedes, Audi, as drivers' cars. And Lincoln said, you know what? There's enough competitors in that space. We're going to try and do our thing. We're not going to try to take them head on in that way, but we're going to try to create a better overall experience for the driver, and for the passengers. And
I think it's working for them. The tech is quite sophisticated. Is it My Lincoln Touch, or do they have another name for it now?
It's
I think
it's just Sync 3.
Sync 3. I didn't know if Lincoln had a name for it.
I don't think they have a separate name for it.
No, I think I apologize. I actually was in the Black Label when I drove it back in the fall.
I drove the Black Label as well when we were out in Santa Barbara.
Lincoln Copilot 360.
Copilot is their ADAS package.
Yeah, that's their ADAS package. And then
it's just Sync 3, I believe, is what they call it.
So thinking back to the Lexus system, I think Sync 3 is
Did you have the Ultra Comfort seats with active motion?
Those are the massaging ones?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It's
Love
for
a good
$62,000, right? Like, it sounds like a lot of money for it. It's not. Like, for what you get in this thing, it's loaded. It has the only thing I think I missed was like a heated steering wheel, which was surprising to me that doesn't have at this. But I think that's a standalone option. But yeah, I mean, and I think it's a really smart play for them to make the interior that good, because you can spend that money on stuff you don't see, right? Like suspension tuning and chassis bracing and, speccing different tires. And that will make a difference to people who notice. But the majority of people who buy these things, they're not going to use that, and they're not going to appreciate it. And they might actually not like it if it's tuned too aggressively. So put the money into the stuff that they're in all the time. Make it feel really good, make it look really good. It's beautiful. It's got I think the interior is called cashmere. I don't know. They have to use funny names. But yeah, everything, it's just, it feels like it's worth the money. And I think that's the first step that both Cadillac and Lincoln really needed to get over. And so I'm impressed with it, because it's sort of come into its own. And it drives quite well. I've really loved that 2.7 liter V6. I like it in everything. I want it in the Mustang.
So was it the white one? Did the creamy chalet?
It's the chalet theme. Yeah. They have different themes in the interior, and it sounds corny, but I think as a buyer, you get into that. You like it when you're going to plunk down your money on these. It's fun to sort of play dream house with it to a certain
and the other thing that comes with Black Label is they do a little curation of the color palette for you and have certain typically 3 combinations on any given model, but then you also get a bunch of other things that they throw in, like free car washes. You can go to the dealer and get a free car wash, and there's a whole bunch of other things that they tack on as part of the Black Label package to try to enhance the overall customer experience.
Well, and that's the way to attract and retain customers, is to treat them like humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a concept.
I think that Lincoln has done a really good job of celebrating the domestically oriented luxury buyer. And that is a thing. As I think I said it before, but these are the people that if they won the lottery, they would buy the most tricked out Ford F-150 they could find.
Well,
right?
They'd be spending $130,000.
They would be. But these are the people that, when you look at some of the Black Label, some of the attributes that it comes with, culinary collections, you get early access to, curated list of exquisite restaurants. It all sounds kind of hokey on the one hand, but on the other hand, you know what? That's really kind of nice.
Yeah.
If that's your lifestyle. Premium maintenance, vehicle care, Sam, as you said, complimentary car washes. I have to tell you right now,
pick up and delivery.
Right?
So
as a Buick owner, I have to beg my dealership to wash my car when I bring it in for service, which I have complained repeatedly to Buick about, because it's outrageous to me that that is not a thing automatically.
And the fact that you can't get a loaner? No, I can't get a loaner when I take my car. It's like, what am I supposed to do?
It's insane. I think they've done, their website is beautiful. I think that they've done a really, really nice job of celebrating that buyer, which Cadillac basically said you should be buying German, and if you're not buying German, then you should buy this.
I like drivers' cars for sure, but and Lincoln has quietly sort of managed this because I think I've been very.
Isn't there a thing quiet luxury?
Yeah,
so well done, well done, you.
I think they're still not doing a good job of telling their story. They need to I like Matthew McConaughey, but their ads are weird, and it's really the Lexus playbook to treat people that well, and that's what makes loyal customers. And so I'm glad that they've learned from that. And while I think this is kind of an old set of hardware, it presents well, I guess. I think they've done a nice job. Their interiors are just gorgeous. Yeah, I would like to see the Nautilus in sort of standard select trims, the sort of 2 lower end trims, and see how it measures up, because it's really easy in the sort of automaker trick, right? Is let's put our most fully loaded model into the press fleet and get all of the kudos. Of course. So I wonder what it's like at that $40,000 or $44,000 level, but I hope that it's good. That's the best I can say.
It's I think we had a chance to. I think they had some of those. Certainly the select or whatever the mid-level trim was at the press launch, and I think they're not dramatically different. In terms of what you get. You're not going to get the 22-way seats. For example, You're going to get 12-way seats, which are in general are going to be fine.
Oh darn!
But and even with the 4-cylinder engine, the 2-liter 4-cylinder, it's not going to have quite the aggressive acceleration that you're going to get with the V6, but it's still more than adequate. And when you're talking about this this whole quiet luxury theme, you're not looking for all out acceleration performance all the time anyway.
Right.
No, I'm hopeful. It's sort of the first time in a while that I've Lincoln still has a couple blind spots in their lineup, and it's good that this particular size class of crossover isn't one of them, because this is a really important segment. It would be good to see Lincoln get a version of the Escape. Well, they have the MKC.
And that that's we're probably going to see the Corsair sometime this before the end of this year. Maybe even at the New York Auto Show. I'm not sure when that's coming out. It'll probably be either New York or sometime in the summer, which will be the replacement for the MKC. based off the new generation Escape platform.
Yeah, and then I'd be really curious to see what Lincoln would do with an EcoSport. EcoSport size, not the actual EcoSport. There's only so much you can do with that. But
yeah, I think we'll probably have to wait, another year or two for that. For the next generation EcoSport platform to arrive before that comes out.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just looking through, I pulled up my local dealership here, and the majority of the vehicles that they have at the Stamford Lincoln dealership is the Select. So they seem to be stock. Select and Reserve, I would say, are the so they're in the 57s. They've got a couple of black labels that are in the 63s, but it looks like for the most part, what they're stocking dealerships with is that Reserve, which is in the mid 50s.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think those are the two middle trims. There's 4 trims, so
yeah.
Most people are going to shoot for the middle anyway.
Right, exactly. But I think it's certainly something that people should consider, just based on the interiors and the ride and handling, and I think it's a great family car.
Yeah, for the opulent family.
Exactly. Gold-plated
the opulent family of 4.
Right.
Yes.
No, you can get 5 in it.
Well, you can get 5. But I mean, if you have to do car seats, if you still have younger ones, you'd probably want a 3-row in that case.
Right.
Well, they also offer, sir, over here is the Navigator.
Yeah. Well, and this summer they're going to have the Aviator.
Do they still have the MKT?
Well, they do for fleet only, isn't that? Yeah, I got to tell you though, I drove the Navigator from Irvine, California, up to where is this located? I drove it up through rush hour traffic and drove it up to around the Thousand Oaks area, and I was absolutely.
That's a terrible drive.
Yes, it is. I don't think
going up the 405.
I'm trying to get the location of this, because I don't remember exactly where I was, which is terrible, I know. But it was more along the coast. But I got to tell you, that the Navigator was surprisingly good to drive. I mean, it's not sporty, but again, I was able to navigate through the traffic. Oh, no pun intended. That was bad. The way that in a much more pleasant manner than I had expected, because whenever I'm driving one of those really big cars, I always look to see does it drive bigger or smaller than it looks? And that Navigator definitely drove smaller than it looked. Oh, I went up to Santa Ynez, Ventura.
Santa Ynez.
Goleta. I was in that area. So again, it was, not a great time to drive it. It was definitely crowded. I mean, through the 101 through LA is always a nightmare. And I really felt like I was in a smaller vehicle, and I loved the super high riding position. It was really easy to get in and out of. So as a smaller female, if I had kids, I would initially look at the Navigator and say, you got to be kidding me. But once I was in it, it was incredibly comfortable, and just driving it, it drove just so much smaller than it looks.
Well, so part of that, I think, is because it's a truck, right? The windows come down further because it's side impact is different. You're not in this little cocoon. You've got lower sort of window. I'll call it window sills. I don't know what the actual word is, but they come down further, so you have more visibility out. You feel more in command. And I like really big things in heavy traffic like that. If they're big, comfortable SUVs, especially if they have dynamic cruise and stuff, you just kind of. You can let it do its thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and the funny thing is that I actually had an Aston Martin in the middle of this trip.
That sounds like an awful trip.
So I was buzzing around in the Aston Martin Vantage down in the San Diego area. And then I had to drop off the Aston at Kelley Blue Book and pick it up the Navigator.
I'm glad that you sacrificed for for that so that you could bring the impressions?
I'm very brave. I'm a sacrificer. That's me.
All right.
That's what we're here for, is, to fall on the grenade so that our listeners don't have to.
Right. We drove this stuff. So, right.
So you don't have to.
Right. All right. Well, let's do some topics, because there's been a couple of things going on, as there always are. The most shocking, I think, recently is just numbers weirdness with NHTSA and autopilot safety, and the study that just it almost seems like they didn't want this to get out until they were FOIA'd, and they had to admit. And
even then, they didn't.
Yeah.
They fought it for 2 years.
Yeah. So let's sort of, can you give us sort of the quick summary?
Yeah. So going back to May of 2016, we had the fatal crash, Josh Brown in a Tesla Model S in Florida.
Was that the truck one where
where his Model S on autopilot went underneath the truck.
Right, because it thought it was the sky and didn't recognize it as white. Yeah.
Yeah. And so both NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, and NHTSA did an investigation into the crash. They found that while they declared that autopilot wasn't necessarily at fault, that Tesla was not doing a good enough job of informing customers of what the system was capable of, or more importantly, what it's not capable of, and also made some other suggestions. But one of the things that came out of the NHTSA report was that they declared that Tesla cars equipped with autopilot, after they enabled autopilot, their incidence of airbag deployments from crashes dropped by 40%. But they never gave any of the background data as to how they came up with that number. And I actually tried to reach out at the time to Tesla. I asked them several times, if they had the data, where was the data that came, where that number came from, and they, of course, never responded to that.
Well, sir, we just made it up.
Yeah, and I didn't pursue it, but another company called Quality Control Systems, led by a guy named Randy Whitfield, filed a FOIA request with NHTSA to try to get the data, where they came up with this 40% number. And NHTSA fought for 2 years not to release this. They claimed that this is proprietary data from Tesla, and releasing it, could be harmful to Tesla. Well, yeah, it could be harmful to Tesla because it shows that the number was nonsense. But that's neither here nor there. But the court finally forced NHTSA to release the data. And so Whitfield went through and did a pretty thorough analysis of all of this stuff. And Ed Niedermeyer's got had a pretty good write-up earlier this week on the Drive on what they found. And basically, as you said, they essentially made it up. There were, at the time, there were about 43,781 cars that were nominally part of the study. But of those, only 5,700 actually had full verifiable data of how many miles had been driven before autopilot was enabled and after autopilot was enabled. But they used the full 44,000 car fleet to calculate these numbers. And so for the ones where they didn't have data, they basically just made some assumptions, which had nothing to back those assumptions up. And when Whitfield went through and did his analysis, he found that essentially the way NHTSA made their assumptions dramatically skewed the results in favor of autopilot, showing that autopilot was in fact safer. But if you take out the numbers that can't be verified and focus on the verifiable stuff, and take out some of the other assumptions, it actually shows that the cars were actually much safer beforehand. So this is a real problem. NHTSA is not here to promote,
right.
to promote any particular company or technology. They're supposed to be promoting safety in general.
So what's their motivation for making those assumptions? Like, you should know that you don't assume,
Yeah. It's hard to say, without, knowing, all the deliberations that went on internally. But, if you go back to 2016, 2015, 2016 timeframe, in the previous administration, there was certainly, a lot of motivation to promote Tesla and to promote electric vehicles, much more so than there is under the current administration in Washington. So perhaps, some people within the agency, perhaps even including the then administrator, decided that, it was worth it to go down this path. The administrator at the time was Mark Rosekind, who is now the chief safety officer of Zoox. He had, during his time initially at NTSB as a member of the National Transportation Safety Board, and then as NHTSA administrator, was always a very strong proponent of safety technologies and driver assist systems and automation systems. I don't know. I can't say where this originated within the agency and, who made the decisions to do it this way. But, this is a real black eye for the agency, and it does not bode well. If they continue to do this same kind of thing in promoting automated driving technology, which in a way they kind of are by being so hands off with, trying to, with their approach to regulating it or more accurately, not regulating the technology, then I think, we may be in for a world of hurt, by allowing companies to put stuff out on the road that hasn't really been properly tested, hasn't been properly vetted, and proven to actually be a benefit. I think that this technology can be a real benefit, can be a real safety benefit, but we haven't actually proven that yet.
Yeah. The other thing that sticks out is that the cars before Autopilot was enabled were safer. Now, I don't know whether that's the cars. My suspicion is that it's actually behavior that plays a role in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because one of the issues with Autopilot is we've seen from all the videos that have been posted on YouTube over the last several years, a lot of Tesla drivers behaving badly with Autopilot, assuming that it, or treating it as if it's a fully automated system, and doing all kinds of stupid things, which ultimately can lead to crashes.
Well, let's face it, we still have examples of where pilots have done this. This was years ago. There was a small commuter plane that flew into Buffalo, and the pilots ignored all of the warnings because they had taken it so much for granted by then that they just weren't paying attention, and the plane crashed. And I think that we have to, keep reminding people that Autopilot in Tesla does not mean it's a level 5 self-driving vehicle or a level 4, whatever one you want. But I do think that these ADAS systems can help a lot. Again, last night I was stuck in all that traffic. And when you see a lane opening, having the blind spot monitoring, having the lane departure warnings, having these kinds of feedback that the vehicle gives you, those are all things that are really helpful. But the idea that you can, go sit in the back seat and watch a movie is not realistic.
They're trying to change that, though. But, I think also we saw this back, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when automakers really resisted any kind of statistical analysis. And it was the Army that started it, right? When they noticed that they had a lot more casualties off base around bases. And they're like, look, we can't be losing people before we even send them anywhere. So let's get a handle on this. And then that research got picked up by actuaries, and it wound up with Ralph Nader with Unsafe at Any Speed. Say what you will about it. it really spurred a more statistical, scientific testing, a better way to do things than just wild safety claims. If you look back at the safety claims that automakers were making in the 40s and 50s, our padded dashboard is safer. Like, it's maybe the appearance of safety, but underneath that quarter-inch of padding is still metal. You're gonna break your face. So a lot of the things that we take for granted now are because of that very aggressive push, and it was divisive and it was polarizing, and the automakers hated it, and it did make cars heavier and more expensive to a certain degree. But
it also made them a lot safer, and a lot. Given the number of miles we drive today, we have reduced the number of traffic fatalities, or the rate of traffic fatalities, by about 80% over the last 40 years.
Yeah, they're amazingly
safe. The
mid-1970s. You're not going to spear yourself on, shiny bullet-shaped switches in a crash.
Or steering wheel hubs.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things seem like common sense, but they weren't there before somebody started looking at it and saying, all this automotive gore, we can get rid of a lot of that. So let's please not go back to that. And the 40% number is probably, I don't know if that tipped you off, Sam, when the numbers sort of came out. I think that's what tipped Ed off. Was like, something's not right here. That's much too large.
There were a bunch of us that that saw that number and thought, there's something's not right here. This does not make sense.
I think that this emphasizes the need for independent, objective points of view and analysis, not just relying on government conclusions or government entities to say whether something is safe or not. I mean, I'm glad that he did this, because we have to continue to encourage multiple outlets looking at any kind of results, not just Tesla related.
Yeah, I mean, in any kind of scientific study or any other study or research, you do peer review. You need to have other people take a look at your results and do a sanity check on it.
Exactly.
And I think probably the most troubling thing about this whole situation is that NHTSA fought this for 2 years. Fought releasing these numbers. There is no excuse for that. NHTSA is a government agency. They belong to us. To the people paying for it. And we have a right to every single piece of data that they collect. That's nothing.
Not what the lobbyists say.
Well, that's bullshit. They're wrong. We should have everything that they produce should be open source, and we should have the ability to take a look at it and analyze it and verify it independently.
Yeah, because what the flip side is, nobody wants this, right? The insurance industry becomes the good guy here. Do you want the insurance industry to be the good guy? Yeah. But that's actually what happens, is because IIHS does their own independent testing, so we have NHTSA and IIHS sort of counterbalancing each other. That's not a real great place to be in a certain way. But yeah, the insurance industry is going to chase this stuff down because they're paying to fix the stuff and the people that get hurt when incidents happen. So they need to know. And you'd be shocked at how accurate and granular their numbers are.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I saw this, when I wrote and contributed to a couple of National Academies of Science committees one was on fuel economy standards and one was on electric vehicle deployment. And people definitely have an agenda when they are sitting at that table. I brought in Strategic Vision, which does new car buyer surveys, and to talk about some of their results for people that bought electric vehicles and people that did not buy electric vehicles. And this also is some of the work I did in Saudi Arabia. And so after Alexander Edwards presented to the committee and showed, what people prioritized when it came to their vehicle selection, one of the academics at the table said, well, you can make numbers say anything you want. And she just completely dismissed it, everything, because it didn't match with what she wanted to see. And meanwhile, she rode a bicycle to work and didn't even own a car. And she's sitting at the table. It was just horrifying to me.
That's I think, and because I come at it from an advertising background, I'm looking at behavior, and I can't. It's so much more difficult to force a change in behavior for customers. and we're seeing this with electric cars to a certain degree, and is you've got to go where they are. We say very flip, it's a fish where the fish are, but it's true. You meet the customer where they are. So if they're not going to buy the Volt, figure out what they are going to buy and make that. And, I think that's why a lot of EV projects start off as high-end cars, because those are the people with the interest. Tesla has helped burnish the image of that sort of as a tech device. It's the cool iPhone of cars. And they have the money. So they start it there and then bring it down is always the plan, right? We're going to sell the expensive one and that's going to fund the cheap one. We're not there yet, but
no, but that's the thing, is that the early adopters, the profile of innovators and early adopters are people that that are willing to risk and have the money to do so. And that's where General Motors went wrong, not making Chevrolet or Cadillac their luxury, their electric vehicle brand. Because that's what people want. People that are willing to buy an electric vehicle. First of all, it's usually not their only car. They're not price sensitive. They're risk oriented. They're innovators, entrepreneurs, and they don't want to come home after a long day and drive a Chevy. They want to drive a Cadillac. And so, so Tesla they've done a lot of good for electric vehicles and getting the technology out there, but obviously there's also a lot of issues as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I almost wonder if the EV part of Tesla is not most of the story. Now, I think when I hear of Tesla, a lot of people are talking about or asking me about the ADAS tech, the self-driving, the autopilot, and how cool all that is. And
right.
The EV stuff is like, yeah, it's electric. That's fine. What's there to say about that? Versus all of the other stuff that Teslas will do.
Well, but I think that what Tesla has done is they've almost, they've normalized the electric vehicle. So people want a Tesla, as you say, for the brand image, for the cool factor, for the fact that they keep your dog safe in dog mode.
Yeah.
And it happens to be an electric vehicle. I see what the Audi e-tron, that is the Audi, it happens to be an electric vehicle. But I think this e-tron is a good example of where it does meet people where they are. It's an SUV and that's what people want. Yeah. But so Tesla's done a good job of kind of saying, well, of course it's an electric vehicle. Why wouldn't it be? And it just happens to do all these other cool things.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of people talk about, innovation at Tesla, and, the ADAS stuff, they've done, kind of a half-assed job at a lot of it. But I think, one area where they actually have done some really interesting things that doesn't get talked about a lot is, in terms of their on the electric side, on the electric propulsion side, the efficiency of their system. And this is something I've talked to clients about. If you look at the size of the battery and what kind of mileage range they get for a given size of battery, Tesla is actually doing a better job than anybody right now, in the segments where they're competing. If you look at, the Model X, for example, getting 295 miles of range, out of a, out of a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack, and the Jaguar I-Pace, which is a much smaller, much lighter vehicle, only getting 234 miles of range out of the same size battery pack. And we've seeing similar things. The e-tron, as good as it might be in a lot of ways, is similarly challenged in its range capabilities for the for 95 kilowatt hour battery pack, and same with the Mercedes EQC. The power conversion efficiency, that's an area where Tesla has really innovated and done some really cool stuff, and that's where everybody needs to be playing catch up.
Well, right. That's where the automaker that actually buys them out of bankruptcy is going to benefit.
Yes.
I do just want to comment. I do love the fact that they have put in this dog mode. Have you guys seen it? It came out yesterday.
No, I mean, I think all of those things are, it's a way to keep your car in the news. So it's clever, and it's software, and it's something that you can do in any car. Tesla happens to be actually very good about coming up with those things that, they are shiny objects, but they're also things that people will use because they're there. And
Absolutely right. But I mean, it's a good example of where Tesla is an amazingly nimble and company, to say, hey, you know what, we can do this, and let's just do it. Let's just throw it out there. And again, their buyers are incredibly forgiving in that, now, God forbid this Tesla dog mode doesn't work. And so just for people, it basically puts it leaves the air conditioning running on hot days to keep the dog safe inside. And then it uses the big giant screen to tell people that look inside, my owner will be back shortly. The car is air conditioned, all is well in my world. But I think it's super clever, and it humanizes the Tesla brand in ways that a lot of manufacturers don't humanize their brand. And so, again, it's a very clever way of using the technology, and they put these things out really quickly. It's amazing.
On the other hand, I'd like to see them focus a little more on some of the fundamentals. Like, making sure that, on cold days, those frameless windows can actually drop down a little bit so you can open the doors.
Sam, details.
Or the door handles that pop out. And I bet you probably want OTA updates that are actually tested.
Well, let's not go overboard.
I was going to say, dog tested, parent approved, but I think that's Subaru.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we start to hate too much on Tesla, let's move on. It's probably our last topic. There's a new inline-six from Land Rover to replace their very old V6, and we also had a Twitter question sort of about the difference between a V6 and inline-six, the shape, but if there's benefits and trade-offs. So why don't we jump in and sort of answer those questions and cover the new Land Rover inline-six?
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned that old V6. I mean, that's actually based on Ford's old Duratec V6 that debuted back in the 1990s. And it was adapted for Jaguar and Land Rover, and so it's been around for a while. And they're finally replacing it with the new Ingenium V6, which is basically their the 4-cylinder engines that they've had for the last few years, with 2 more cylinders added on there. So. The question we got from Dallas on Twitter was, what's the real difference between a V6 and an inline-six? And there's the shape, but what are the benefits and trade-offs? An inline-six, obviously, all 6 cylinders are in line, hence the name, and they're all parallel to each other. A V6, you have 2 banks of 3 cylinders that have some angle in between them, typically either 60 or 90 degrees.
60 good, 90 bad.
Yeah,
not 90
for the
worse.
most part. Although there are some surprisingly good 90-degree V6s.
That Jaguar V6 is a 90 degree, and it's got balance.
No, it's a 60.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
No,
it's a 60.
But
Honda's V6s have always been 90-degree V6s, and they're great engines.
Really, that's a 90. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, to address the question of what. Inline-sixes are always better because they're smoother. They're inherently balanced because of the nature of the way the ignition pulses happen and the forces acting on the engine. It's balanced in both. I'm not going to go into all the technical details, but they're balanced. First in order imbalances are all canceled out. And so when you have an engine with an inline 6-cylinder engine, or a car with an inline 6-cylinder engine, it's amazing how smooth that engine is. And generally, the more cylinders you have, the better it's going to be because you have smaller gaps between power pulses, and things will cancel each other out. But you can still have imbalances even in V8 engines. V12s are the next best thing to or the next step up from an inline 6. V6s do tend to, no matter what bank angle you use, there are some imbalances. Even a 60-degree V6 has some imbalances, but they're not as pronounced as what you get on, say, an inline 4-cylinder. The reason why we went to a lot of V6s over the last 30 years is as we transitioned a lot of vehicles from rear-wheel drive to front-wheel drive, and turned the engine 90 degrees so it's transverse. Inline 6s, because the cylinders are all parallel to each other, also tend to be a little longer. A V6 tends to be a little more compact in length. It's wider, but it's shorter, and it tends to fit better between the strut towers of a front-wheel drive vehicle. And also, in a lot of cases, a lot of V6s were created by taking old V8s and chopping two cylinders off. As GM was and Ford were both want to do in the 1980s.
Well, so that's interesting. The SX V6, the 3.8 liter Ford, is not a 302 minus two cylinders. That was a clean sheet design, and the tell is the distributor location.
Yeah, but it still it shared some architectural things with the SX.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure the bore spacing was the same as the SX.
Oh yeah, probably. Depending on where
or the Windsor. I mean,
yeah, probably had to go down their lines, so they were compromising. Engineers compromise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, engineering is always a compromise. Inline sixes were always preferred. And that's why BMW has continued to build inline sixes forever. They've never done a V6 engine. They've always built inlines because they were always superior in terms of performance and smoothness and reliability. V6s, as I said, more compact. They can shake a little more, but they can fit into places where an inline can't. Now, as we're starting to get a lot of these newer vehicles, or even vehicles that never went front wheel drive, they're starting to go back to inline sixes. On the Mercedes launched a new inline six last year on the CLS and the S Class, and it's launching here in the US this year in the E53 models. The modern inline sixes, with the things that they've learned about designing cylinder blocks and everything, they've actually been able to and managing the coolant flow through the block and the new materials. They've actually managed to make the blocks more compact than they used to be. So they're still not as short as a V6, but they'll fit into tighter spaces now, and they're being used in rear wheel drive applications. And in this case of this new Jaguar engine, or the Jaguar Land Rover engine, it's actually launching in a limited edition version of the Range Rover Sport. That's currently only for the UK market. And I heard from my contact at Jaguar Land Rover, it'll be launching in the US next year. This is actually their first one that's also a 48-volt mild hybrid, and it's twin charged. So it's got a exhaust-driven turbo, but it's also got an electric supercharger that's driven off the 48-volt system to provide that low-end boost, and it can spin up to 65,000 RPM in less than half a second. To give you full boost in less than half a second. They're not the first to do this. That Mercedes inline six also has a similar capability. And when Audi launched the SQ7 in Europe a couple of years ago with the first 48-volt system, they also did that on that vehicle.
I wonder if it's the same supplier for all three for that supercharger.
It might be. It's almost certainly one of two suppliers. It's probably either Vallejo or Borg Warner. I know Borg Warner supplies the electric turbo for Mercedes, or the electric supercharger for Mercedes, and Vallejo supplies the one that Audi uses. So it's probably one of those two, although it could be a Honeywell as well. They're also doing one.
Huh. It's just, sorry, that's like auto geekdom, but I think one of the other reasons for them making this inline six too has got to be for emissions. That other V6 that they're transitioning out of now it's old.
Oh yeah. Well, emissions and fuel economy, because they're doing the 48-volt mild hybrid, like FCA is doing on the Wrangler and on the Ram 1500.
Yeah, and so are they expecting it to actually just sort of slot in where that existing engine does and be on par in terms of power? Or are we expecting more, or what's
it'll actually probably be a little more. Right now there's two versions of it with like 355 and 395 horsepower. So that, for a 3-liter inline six, that's not too shabby.
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna damn it with kind of faint praise. All right. My biggest question is, like, now they have a proper engine, right? Like, Jaguars are supposed to have inline sixes, and Land Rovers, I mean, Land Rover is supposed to have 3.9 liter V8s from.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I don't think we're going to see the 3.9 V8 come back anytime soon.
No,
but I'm sure that we will have Jaguar XFs, with this, and probably the XE with this engine before long, and as well as other Land Rover, Range Rover models as well.
Doesn't strike me as a bad thing.
No.
Right. Well, I think we answered the question pretty thoroughly.
Yep.
Sam, you and I talked with Mike Pruitt from Ford about the new 2020 Super Duty, and overall, but also more specifically about the 7.3 liter pushrod V8 that everybody wants to know about. And so he offered us some detail, and I'm sure we'll have more to come on that when they start to invite journalists to come see and come drive and release more information about the engine. But it's a really interesting development from Ford, and he had a few things to say that were informative. So we'll tack that on at the end of the episode here, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, and you can head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review or drop some feedback into the review section of your podcatcher of choice. If you want to get in touch with us, we're at wheelbearingscast@gmail.com. You can comment, of course, on any of the posts at wheelbearings.media. The Twitter handle is @wheelbearingscast. Only vowel is the A in the cast. And thanks for listening. Mike Pruitt, thank you very much for joining us on the Wheel Bearings podcast. We're here to talk about the new 2020 Super Duty that debuted in Chicago to a bit of fanfare.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Question for you. I mean, I think probably the biggest news about the 2020 truck is the powertrain upgrades. You added a new gas V8, an all-new gas V8, and significantly updated the diesel. Added the third generation of the diesel. Let's start with the 7.3 liter gas V8. First of all, why a new gasoline V8, and why an all-new design like this one? A cam block, cast iron block, as opposed to something based on the existing 6.2 liter that you already had in the Super Duty.
Sure. So I guess start with kind of the why. Today it's a piece that was kind of missing in our lineup. Between in our retail world, between our 6.2 liter base gas, and then of course our upgraded 6.7 liter diesel. And what we were aiming for is trying to provide that increase in capability, but not necessarily the complete cost and complexity of going to a diesel. So that was within Super Duty, kind of the why and the missing aspect that our customers were saying that they were looking for. But at the same time, we as Ford, we look across all of our businesses, across our commercial businesses and other areas, and you don't take an all-new engine lightly, right? This is a big investment and a lot of work. So we aim to try to find an engine that's going to be there not only for Super Duty, but for other areas in our portfolio, in particular, like in our medium-duty trucks. So this is a gas engine that's going to be capable of delivering the capability that's needed in these medium-duty, the F650 and F750s, but also serve our customers in the Super Duty world.
It sounds like there's plans to put it in other vehicles. I mean, certainly the medium-duty trucks are somewhat related to the Super Duties, but is it going anywhere else, or is it mostly a truck engine?
I guess I better... I don't have my lawyers here, so I want to be able to
we don't comment on future product, right? I get it.
So, Mike, in the announcement last week of this new engine, the new 7.3 liter, didn't really talk too much about power levels. The 6.2 is currently at 385 horsepower, 430 foot-pounds of torque. The diesel, the second gen diesel was at 450 horsepower and 935 foot-pounds. Where does the 7.3 fall in that range? How much more are you getting versus a 6.2?
So we're not at this point ready to be able to divulge the precise numbers of that, but I can tell you that this will be the most powerful gas that we've put in a Super Duty ever. And it would be, I guess, the appropriate thing is it will be somewhere in between those two, between the 6.2 and the 6.7. Okay. Probably not as specific as you'd like, but that's the best we can do.
Well, it's early yet.
Unfortunately, these things rarely are as specific as we would like.
Yeah, I know.
And, I was really curious about, because Ford has spent, 30 years invested in overhead cam V8s. Was it a challenge to relearn how to do a cam and block engine? Did you have to draw on some old hands who had experience back with the Windsors and the Clevelands, or was it an opportunity to do something similar but with a clean sheet?
I think it's more of the latter. It's an opportunity to start something with a clean sheet. We've got some incredibly smart guys over here at our engine area, and like I said, it was a clean sheet of, hey, we want to produce a truck engine that's going to serve our commercial customers as well as this retail customer. You've got a blank sheet of paper. How would you guys do this? And that's where we've ended up. Always trying to keep in mind, the cost of ownership challenges that you have in the commercial area, as well as in the retail and the thrive for horsepower and torque and its improved capability.
Ford has already announced plans to do electrification in the light-duty F-Series, coming, an F-150 hybrid coming next year, and Mr. Ford recently talked about, eventually doing a full electric version of it. And there's new competitors coming into the heavy-duty and medium-duty segments in the next few years, or even sooner than that are fully electric. Do you foresee a time in the not too distant future when we'll see electrified Super Duties and potentially medium duties from Ford as well?
Well, I mean, we are always looking to improve ourselves in not only in the Super Duty area, but across our whole truck lineup. But I don't think we're in a position where we can talk about future plans.
Well, let me rephrase the question a little bit then. Right now, or in the near term, do you see electrification as electric powertrains as a viable alternative for these types of vehicles? Ford has a lot of experience in there. You sell a lot of vehicles in these segments. Do you see electrification as a suitable alternative right now, or is that something that you think is better left to some future date?
So the electrification in this area is a real challenge, right? There's a demand out there for the zero emissions and leveraging this technology, but at the same time, these trucks have to do the purpose, right, and pull the payload. And so until you've been able to solve that equation, it's going to have some more work done.
So let's talk about more than just powertrains too. It seems like there's a couple of simultaneous fronts going on in the heavy duty pickup wars, I guess you could call them. On the one hand, you've got the numbers war with towing capacity, maximum torque, maybe even fuel economy. But there's also luxury and features or tech war that's going on in the HD truck space. They're not all about work and nothing else anymore. They're getting quite cushy. So how do you determine what's important sort of on both fronts?
Yeah, it's a great question. We as in Super Duty really brought luxury into this segment when we started introducing the King Ranch, and then later the Platinum, and then the limited edition. So it's always a delicate balance of it, but it never at the compromise of being able to do work, right? And never at that compromise. And the delicate balance that we're always looking for and trying to understand the demands from the customer. So yes, from that aspect in the luxury area, they want it to work during the week and then play on the weekends, or do, after it's done its work for the day, be able to go out for dinner and perform the other purposes. So that's something we've been very keen to, and we will continue to do. On the technology side, nowadays the request to bring in some of the technologies you see in some of the smaller cars, whether it's the lane departure warnings or pre-collision assist with automatic emergency braking. All of those things are things that the customer has said that they want to see in this segment. So we're bringing that in. Embedded modems and the ability for these teams to leverage the Wi-Fi services that provides, and the connectivity and the smartness, especially for our commercial customers. And that's going to be standard in every single Super Duty for 2020.
So
embedded modem.
It might be a little easy to assume that the truck audience might be kind of tech averse, but there's a lot of driver aid systems packed into the new Super Duties that help with things such as backing up a trailer, and even just
sure.
the ADAS, lane keeping and that kind of thing. Is that stuff that people are asking for, or is there skepticism, but then it gets embraced pretty quickly?
No, for sure. I think there's a mixture that there is some request out there for, hey, I want to protect my asset, and in particular, you're not only protecting the people. These are very expensive assets that some of these people have invested in. So if we can prevent that collision, or if we can minimize the damage associated with it, that's right back to their bottom dollar. That's very important. These trucks tow some very large trailers and very large payloads, and in some cases they have to fit this trailer into some pretty tight spaces. So everything that we can do to help them get that, those big trucks in some of the tightest spaces through technology, and that's why we worked so hard in what would it take to bring Pro Trailer Backup Assist, which we have at F-150, into the Super Duty realm.
Yeah,
there will be some of those guys that just choose not to use it, but then there's going to be a very large portion that are going to find that technology very useful and make their life more efficient. It's not that they have to have it, just making their lives easier.
Yeah, speaking of the Pro Trailer Backup Assist, I mean, I had an opportunity to actually try that out on the Expedition last year, and it was, as someone who does not normally drive such large vehicles and doesn't tow trailers, I personally found it very helpful. But I'm curious, I was last week at the Chicago show. I was speaking to somebody from one of your competitors who was rather dismissive of that particular technology, and I'm curious, if you have any data, from F-150 owners about, how much or how frequently they use it when they're towing, and kind of what's the response been from F-150 drivers to that particular technology.
Well, so in the F-150 area, I think we've had a very positive response from that technology. I think there is an element of some people that are going to admit to using the technology, and others that are that may not use it. It's kind of that I'm manly. I know how to back up a trailer. I don't help. But if you look at the vast variety of trailers, whether it be on the conventional trailers and gooseneck and fifth wheels, the length of these trailers, and in many cases, it's not always just one person that's driving that asset, right? It's going to have multiple drivers. Anything you can do to make them more efficient and protect that asset, it's very, very critical in this space.
Does Pro Trailer Backup Assist work with a gooseneck?
So that's an important aspect. So yes, we have developed the Pro Trailer Backup Assist, as well as our trailer reverse guidance, which we launched in 2017. Both of those two work in cohesion to provide that improved backup, and it works for fifth wheel and gooseneck now.
Does it work basically the same way? If I recall correctly, on the standard trailers, you have to put a sticker on there, that the camera reads to measure the angle and everything, and you can calibrate it for a number of different trailers. Is it use the same basic concept when doing a gooseneck or fifth wheel trailer?
So no, for the fifth wheel and the gooseneck, it is a stickerless solution that we have for 20 model year. On the conventional,
Okay.
it does use a lot of the same things that you saw on the F-150. But again, for the fifth wheel and the gooseneck, is no stickers.
I've only got one more question, and that's kind of an all-encompassing idea. Is how nervous does it make you when you redesign the HD trucks? Automotive News said that the Ford HD truck business alone is a Fortune 40 big business, larger than Procter and Gamble. That's a lot of pressure.
It certainly is. We don't go lightly when you start talking about changing in our F series, right? And we're very methodical, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to change, right? What we've always stood for is listening to our customers and always improving our product. And that's why you'll see we launched this fantastic Super Duty this generation in 2017, which has been fantastic for us. But we immediately started working on improvements, and especially inside the powertrain area, to get more capability, the more power, the more payload, more technology. So we're always improving. But it's always on a mind of understanding you're not going to just sit back and rest on your laurels. You can't do that.
I guess the question I have, I got a number of inquiries from other media last week about why Ford and your competitors keep upping the ante with heavy duty trucks like the Super Duty. How much payload, how much towing capability do you actually need? I mean, how long does this continuous leapfrogging of each other continue on, especially in light of companies like Ford also at the same time talking about trying to improve fuel economy and doing more electrification on their light duty vehicles. How big of a market, for our listeners out there, how big of a market is there for these kinds of really capable vehicles?
Well, we're always finding the customer asking for more. They're always asking for more, whether it's more capability, better fuel economy, a nicer truck, more technology, protect them. So they're always looking for that, and even in the capability area. And I know a lot of people are saying, "Wow, when is enough enough?" Right? Then when are you the point of return is becoming small? But I don't think we're there yet. That's for sure. And we've had a lot of these trucks are delivering now what is not too long ago you would have to have had a medium duty truck to do. You may have even had to have a CDL driver's license, right? And in some cases, you do on this Super Duty, depending on what you're doing. But these are very capable trucks, and it's from a customer perspective, it's always wanting more.
Yeah, I mean, both of your two primary competitors, are now claiming top towing capabilities in excess of 35,000 pounds, and I would assume that by the time this refreshed Super Duty comes out, you will have a similar claim, if not, leapfrogging them as well. How high do you ultimately see these kinds of towing capabilities go? Do you think are we going to get to 40,000 pounds or more, or is that really is that going to fall into the realm of the bigger medium duty trucks?
Well, let me just take that in two pieces. One, we will be delivering the highest capability, the highest payloads that we have ever done in a Super Duty. As far as how high could this class go, I guess I don't know. I really don't know. It's always going to be a push for us to deliver that incremental capability. I think in a short and near term, it's certainly just going to continue to push, but I don't know where the ceiling is.
Okay. One last one before I hand it back to Dan. the 10-speed transmission that's in here, is that based on the 10-speed that is currently in the F-150, or is this a new transmission?
It's a new version. It started with the 10R80. I guess is the kind of the architect to start. But as you can imagine, this transmission is going to have to be more capable than the one that's in the F-150. So it's going to have to be sturdier, more beefy, handle more torque. So we're calling this the 10R140 transmission.
Okay.
Let's finish it off and just maybe there's a challenge or a problem or just some kind of anecdotal story you could maybe share about bringing this truck to market. Any interesting wrinkle that you think our listeners might enjoy hearing about, a little inside baseball that you could talk about? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure. So I think when you're pushing the limits and where you've being the leader today, and our next generation of trucks, we had to go out and get more capable trailers and things to test these vehicles, and that's always a kind of a proud moment here in Super Duty land, right? That we want to push the limits of what we have. So it's been a while since we've had to go upgrade our trailers and fleets in order to do this testing, but we had to do that for this.
Oh, so the trailers couldn't handle the towing load? They were breaking?
Well, I would say that we needed upgraded trailers to perform our testing that we wanted to do.
Huh.
You couldn't get enough weight to push the truck to its limits?
Or a more capable trailers and equipment to handle what we were going to test. So, back in 2017, we had to get new trailers, and then we turned around, and 3 years later, here with 2020, we had to get even bigger trailers, right?
All right. Well, I don't know about you, Dan, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, Mike. This has been really informative, and I think the insights you've provided about kind of the rationale behind the 7.3 liter have been very helpful, and I think our listeners will really appreciate this.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the 7.3, which I understand why, right? That's new, but I'm just as proud of all the work on this third generation 6.7 liter, which I think everyone's going to be very excited when they see the final product. And then mating both of those engines as well as the 6.2 behind the 10-speed transmission, it's really, really exciting to see what this Super Duty is going to be capable of and how confident it's going to do its job.
That's one thing that actually makes me think for a second. The Power Stroke engine, the 6.7, it's a very interesting engine. It's a hot V with a variable geometry turbocharger. It's pretty exotic, actually. And given how sophisticated, complex, and expensive the emissions controls have become, diesel is still a worthwhile investment, and there's still enough demand for that, even given all of the issues from an ownership side. You talked about total cost of ownership a little earlier with the decision for the gas engine, but diesel is still something that is in demand enough that makes it worthwhile to invest that much in the engine.
Very much so. And it is by far the most popular powertrain offering that we have in Super Duty. And, I think a lot of these customers, they're very astute, and they'll take a look at the full cost of ownership. So, yeah, the diesel might be more expensive up front, but when you're putting lots of miles on them behind the heavy towing trailers, and they're calculating that fuel economy, and, at the end of the day, the diesel might be a better option for some customers than others. But it is by far the most popular engine.
That's a similar argument that was made for the diesel, the 3-liter diesel in the F-150. It's really targeted more at the customers that are towing on a regular or consistent basis, as opposed to those that maybe only tow a few times a year. Because when you do start towing those heavy loads, with the gas engine, it does have a much bigger impact on your fuel consumption than it does with a diesel. So it sounds like the popularity of the diesel on the Super Duty has to do with the fact that they're much more frequently used for towing those heavy loads.
Yeah, I think it's like 90% of our customers are actively towing, versus something I would assume is much smaller in the F-150. I'm not versed to that number, but in our segment, very much so, 90+%.
Well, that's what the trucks are for, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, we're really done this time. But so, thanks, right. Mike Pruitt, for joining us on Wheelbearings.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.